To bring it kind of clear and present to the current topic and discourse that's going on in this kind of political season that we're dealing with, and I hate to bring in politics, but politics plays a huge part of the gauging the temperature of our country currently, and dealing with dealing with the media and what they present as a problem to America and threat, and this kind of war on Islam and Muslims and terrorism and Black Lives Matter movement going on. I really feel this is a topic that couldn't be any more timely, of talking about the sensitivity to other cultures within our own country, more so than even traveling. That's why I guess my point was, you being a traveler, you going internationally and then coming back, does that affect the way that you're dealing with domestic issues of sensitivity here to these other problems that I've been talking about, more so than, let's say, Joe Blow down the street who sits in his house and just kind of gets fed this information from his television screen?
Yeah, I mean, you can get CNN in Indonesia, and you can watch Fox News in Mexico if you've got cable. And it's interesting that when I'm watching, kind of just taking it to the Black Lives Matter and the police brutality that exists in this country, um, to have it seems that this country is going absolutely apeshit. I mean, in a lot of ways, from the outside, then people are talking about Donald Trump, and I'm like, I don't even connect with the species on this level when I'm in these other countries, because I'm so my face is, my attention is turned so far away from kind of the hot button topic of the day. And I think back to living on a small island in the South Pacific, and hearing something, someone died or something major happened, and you're like, oh, okay, and then, like, oh, so what are we gonna eat? It's just, you disengage from the conversation, and it looks like America is a really neurotic country that loves to get really passionate about really, few issues for a short period of time, that it burns out and changes to something else. So I think in terms of, the let's say the Syrian refugees. I mean, who's it going to be next? We talk about the wall, that we have Syrian refugees. I mean, listen, this is a small pocket of the country that is really afraid of outsiders. We don't mind Canadians, but we're, again, and being in Mexico and hearing them, Donald Trump talking about building a wall while you're sitting on some beach, sharing a bottle of mezcal with a French dude and a kind of older Mexican elder or whatever. You kind of want to apologize. In Vietnam, I wanted to apologize. For America's role, and not that I did anything per se, and not that America doesn't offer a good opportunity of life. And I think especially for that newly naturalized citizens really seem to seize the opportunities even more than those of us who've grown up here. But I think Hispanic culture. I mean, listen, this person that just lived in California, been all over Arizona and Mexico and Texas. I mean, that technically is Mexico. Yeah. So when we talk about bringing Syrians in, I mean, the U.S. created ISIS, if I may say, by disbanding the original Iraqi army. I don't know if that's particularly controversial. It just seems to be historically true. I think we're not taking in enough, personally, compared to Germany, even though they could use but I think by examining how Germany is reacting to the influx of Syrian refugees, there's a lot of benefits, and they're looking for the benefits financially, but as a tax resource, but also there's an upsurgence in the Nazi Party, which goes to show that no matter where it is, there's always two sides to the coin.
Well, the thing that I kind of key in on there on an individual level, what you were talking about, I don't know if you specifically said this word, but this word resonates with me when we're talking about cultural sensitivity, whether it's to here in our own country or abroad. And it's a four-letter word, and it's a four-letter F word that a lot of people, don't want to talk about enough. And that word to me is fear. And we fear difference. We're told to fear difference. This is what we're fed, and I think, to me, that's where travel abolishes that word a bit, because as you're exposed to different people, different cultures, different ways of being, we realize that fear word just dissipates, and we realize how much more we're humans and how much more we connect with one another despite our cultural differences, despite the way that we might choose to practice a certain faith or a tradition. And I think that word here in America has been a very divisive one, whether it's in our politics, whether it's in our upbringing. You can tell by the way you're talking about building a wall. I mean, building a wall in itself is the literal sense of divisiveness. You know, we are afraid of your people. We do not want your people here. So we're going to build a large wall. And I guess I will kind of take that to the next level, which would be, how do you get over that fear? Let's say you can't travel, right? Let's say you don't have that opportunity in your life, and you do want to gain a better sense of cultural sensitivity. I'm asking you, what are some ways that you think, let's say you're not raised with parents that naturally teach you these type of habits to be more culturally accepting? I mean, the forum's open. I don't know. I think it's a good point to maybe give our listeners some ideas in your mind how one is more receptive to being culturally sensitive.
Sex, I think, would be a really good way to begin. Find a culture that, of people that you're attracted to, and date someone from that culture that you're attracted to, and naturally you'll learn more, ask questions, because that's kind of the natural component of dating, mating, whatever you want to call it. It's amazing what you can learn by sharing intimacy with someone on so many different levels. And I think the biological imperative is there. And I think if you live in a somewhat culturally diverse place, go have some wild sex with someone you're attracted to from a different culture. And I think if you go eat over their house, they cook for you. They, share with you maybe liquors or beers of their country or whatever. You begin to kind of see these differences in a really compassionate way, because it's the attraction and the kind of desire for love that will fuel that. And I think that's the way that, if I may speak from my own travels, has educated me quite wonderfully to many different places. Because I think at the end of the day, people love to throw around the word racism, which is fear, and I just never got it growing up in New York, because I had, my best friend was Haitian, I had another buddy that was Chinese, and another buddy was Puerto Rican, and I think I was in my teenage years before I realized that not everyone, hated Jews. I was like, wow, there's people that hate Jews, in Arkansas. I'm like, I don't know, we eat bacon together, whatever. It's all good. So no, I guess what it comes down to is people are tribalist. Is what I think is really the undercurrent beyond racist. I think we're tribalist to a point where, I'm sitting on a subway in New York City, and a black woman steps onto the subway and says, oh, there's too many white people, to herself, and then goes and seeks another train car. I think we're tribalist by nature. I think, you're sitting on a bus heading across the country, wherever, and you see, you see that very often you'd sit next to another traveler if you see them on the bus, as opposed to, immersing yourself in locals. And I think it's a symptom of just looking in the mirror and wanting to share in similarity when you've experienced so much stuff that's foreign to you, and kind of get the inside track from someone that's similar to you. I think we see people that are similar to us, but we shouldn't fear difference.
I agree with you. If I'm going to just put in my 2 cents on this topic prior to wrapping this topic of cultural sensitivity up, I'd say that, you bring up a lot of valid points in the how do we attain this higher sense of cultural sensitivity in a practical sense, but in a more spiritual sense. I'd ask people to do a little bit of self-observation. I'd ask people, like you kind of ended it, looking in the mirror. You need to take a look, and you really need to be honest with yourself about your own biases, your own prejudices. You need to be understanding of cultural norms, attitudes, beliefs, value diversity, And the big one to me is listening, and being able and willing to be silent and have a discourse with someone in a way where you don't need to defend your position to be right. You need to listen to their point and have a topic of conversation that potentially your mind gets open to something new. If you can be honest with your own judgments and your own criticisms, that's the only way to me that you can start to be open to another cultures. So to me, it comes from looking at the self, and we can all do that regardless of whether we travel or not. And we all have an opportunity to do that, kind of implore our critical thinking skills. But anyways, so I think that is a good place to kind of leave this topic for now. There's plenty of other things that we can jump into on sensitivity, but in the state that it is, I think that we're good. And I guess if anybody has further comments, hit us back on Facebook, The Daily U, or hit us back on Twitter, at The Daily U. As always, join us here every Monday where we challenge the status quo and engage our brains for something beyond the screen. This is The Spoken You with Jeff and Brett, signing off.